Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi. I picked up a couple of B-Wings and a box of junked up Star Wars vehicles recently, and it's part of my current project list to restore them and bring them back to life. And I've done a couple of videos already showing some of the areas that weren't covered by Retro Blasting's vintage B-Wing restoration. One area they didn't cover as well was the fact that quite often when you find vintage B-Wings, this long gun on the bottom of the ship is snapped off. As you can see here, the one on the right has it, on the one on the left it's clearly missing. It's been snapped and is no longer there. I don't even have the piece to even sort of try and glue it back on. And you'll find when you buy B-Wings, this is pretty often the case. It's snapped and long gone. So I thought I would try and recreate one using some bits and bobs that I have in my toolbox. If you're a toy fixer like me, you tend to keep bits of packaging that look useful, and in my toolbox I found this nice piece of sort of clearish perspex tubing that came in some shoes that Mrs. toy-polloi bought a while back, and it's almost perfect diameter to sort of make a replacement gun from. So that's going to be the basis of this gun piece. Also in my toolbox I found this small connector piece. This again was from some packaging. I can't remember what it was for, but at the time I sort of took it off thinking it looked pretty useful and I might be able to use it to repair a Mego doll's knee, but actually I think this will work even better for the gun on this ship. The gun itself is essentially a tube with a tiny piece of detailing on the front. If I get my unbroken version here, you can see I can easily replace the tube section with this clear plastic tube, which I can then paint. And the end section I'm going to fashion out of this connector. As you can see, it's about the right diameter, and with a little bit of work I can cut that down and make something that looks like this end section. It's just a couple of cylinders with a few sort of flatter pieces on it. So let's go ahead and start cutting this stuff up and we'll see what can be made. So first up I'm going to cut a piece of this tube to length. I'm just going to use a box cutter here to score the bit that I want to cut off, and hopefully it should snap off quite easily. But if not, I can just work my way through it. So here we have a bit of tube that's now the right length. If I hold it up against the unbroken one, you can see that fits quite nicely. I've also fashioned one in to match the sort of cracked off bit that's on my broken version of the ship. It's not actually quite flat, so I've sort of chiseled a little bit out of there just to make it fit quite snugly. So that should work quite nicely. So now what we've got to do is make this end section here. So that's what I thought this bit would work well for. As you can see, I've got sort of two largest end pieces held together with a section in the middle, and the section in the middle I can modify, I reckon, to fit. Actually, this is quite useful that this inner peg actually fits nicely inside this tube here. So what I'm going to do is I think crop this down so that it's the right length, and then we can stick this tube through and glue it into the end there. So let's go ahead and start modifying this slightly. So I've just scored around the edge of this plastic, and I reckon I can just break it. Oh yeah, there you go, just like that. So now I've got a short section that sort of matches the end piece there, and I reckon if I drill a hole through the centre of that so it comes out the other side, I can then use this section to push through it and then glue it in place on the tube. So we'll do that and see if it works. So with a tiny bit of modifying and cutting, cut that much plastic off the outer peg, I've now been able to push through the inner peg through, and I've got a little sort of protrusion at the one end. So I can now, if I hold it up to the stick that I've cut, stick that together, and that's starting, if I bring the original one in, starting to look about the right shape. So we're almost getting there, and this is just from junk plastic that you get in packaging, so it's not bad what you can do. So before I go any further, I'm actually going to glue these two bits together because it will make it easier to work on. This one's a little bit small, and I find I'm dropping it quite a lot. I need to make some flat pieces just to go on the inside there. So I think if I glue it all together, it'll make it a lot easier to work with. So I'm just going to use a little bit of super glue to dab in there and glue this together, and that should work nicely. So let's grab a little bit of super glue. put some on this end. Glue this in place like so. Next up, I need to create these horizontal sort of lines that go along the edge of the barrel. So for that I'm going to use an old CD case. I've already actually cut some bits off a CD case and stuck them on to do two of the pieces. As you can see, they fit quite nicely. It's just a case of using some plastic cutters that I have and just need to take off a small section of the CD case and then, because it's a fairly sort of easily broken plastic, you can fashion it quite easily, just nipping bits of it off using these, and I can generate something that's the right size just to fit in that gap. So just a careful bit of chopping, and I can create the other two, and we can get that end piece looking about the right shape, and then go ahead and paint it. So I just cut it until it fits exactly within the gap, and then I can cut that down to be the thinner strip. Like so, and now hopefully that should fit, which it does nicely in there, so I can just go ahead and glue that in place. The trick for gluing these small pieces into place is not to put the super glue onto the item that you're gluing, but dab a little bit of glue onto a bit of paper like this. Then using a pair of tweezers you can carefully grab the small bit of plastic and dab it into the glue, and then you have much more control on how much glue you put on the item, and we can slot this in place here. To attach the gun section to the ship, I've taken the whole gun portion off the bottom of the B-wing, as you can see here, and you can see clearly where the original gun has snapped off. Now I don't think gluing it on is going to be an option, so what I want to do is drill a hole through pretty much where the centre of the gun should be. So if I can just line that up, so about there, and drill through that, and then also through this back section, because again, just screwing the gun on through there, this is quite a thin bit of plastic and I don't think it will give it much strength, but if I can go through both sections of this plastic, it's a lot firmer. So I'm going to go ahead now and drill a hole as close to the centre as I can get through there, through the back, so that I can then fit this screw and screw into the new gun barrel. So now that I've got a couple of holes drilled, I'm going to test fit the gun to see if it actually looks good in place, and in case it needs any modifications before I go ahead and paint it. So I can just screw this screw through here, and it's already fitting. This is actually going to be quite a firm fixing, which is what I wanted, because I just don't want this gun to break off again after I've gone to all this effort to make a replacement. So now I should be able to just offer this up here. So here we have the test piece in place, and as you can see, that's a pretty good match. Obviously it's not painted at the moment, but it's the right length. It's pretty firmly held in place. I haven't screwed it in fully at the moment, but even still that's pretty solidly in place. So by the time I paint this up, get it the same shade of grey, I think that's going to be a pretty good replacement sort of reconstruction, one of these long guns on the B-wing. So let's see about painting this up. For painting the gun, I'm going to use my favourite Humbrol paints. These are acrylics. I'm using numbers 34 and 33, and I'm going to mix them together until I get a grey that's a similar shade to the gun grey here. So first up is just to start mixing. I'm actually going to mix white into black because it's closer to the darker colour than the lighter colour. And at some point we'll end up with a grey that looks about the right tone. See, already that's looking pretty nice. Actually, it's pretty close to the grey. I've got quite a nice lot mixed, so I can go ahead now and just paint this liberally onto the gun. Make sure it's fully covered, and hopefully I should be able to cover any small gaps that are left from where the plastic doesn't join. So here's the gun now that the paint is dry, and as you can see that's actually a pretty good match for colour. It's not quite as shiny as the original plastic, so I think I'm going to give this a coat with a clear lacquer that I have. It's a spray clear lacquer, so just one quick coat of that would also make the paint a little bit stronger and less liable to get chipped, and should make it just a little bit more shiny and match that original plastic. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we can put this all back together and see how well that looks when it's all attached, and we'll compare it against an original one. And so here we have the finished gun. As you can see, it's actually pretty good. It matches the colour quite nicely. I've got the tone of the paint right, and also the shininess isn't too bad. And as you can see, if you compare it to the original one at the back, it's slightly thicker at the end, but I think for display purposes, most people wouldn't even notice that that was a replacement gun. And as this is a very common thing to break off on these B-Wings, I'm pretty happy with how that's come out. And this otherwise junked B-Wing that I picked up is now starting to look pretty good, and it's almost ready to go back on display. So for a part that is easily broken, I'm pretty happy with this fix. I know this is not something that everyone can do, but it's certainly pretty easy to do, and it just requires keeping a few, as you buy stuff, find useful bits of packaging and keep them to hand, because you never know when you're going to be able to make something out of them. As you can see, with fairly little bit of work and some sort of ingenious thinking, you can actually make something quite good from pretty much anything that you have around. So I hope that video has been of interest to you, and thanks for watching.